Hello, I'm your host, Efi Pylarinou, and today I have the pleasure to have with us a very special guest, Tanvi Singh, who I know for a while now. We're both from the traditional financial world. First of all, before I dive into your background, Tanvi, let me welcome you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Effie, for having me. I've been a listener of your YouTube channel for a couple times and very impressed with the variety and diversity of speakers you have brought in, and feel very honored to be one of them today.
Yeah, and I'm excited. You're actually in India. You'll tell us all about it. So for our listeners, I have met Tanvi many times in her capacity at UBS. She was leading big data, AI analytics, and then digital assets. So we frequently were at great conferences here in Zurich and in Davos also. And now she has left the corporate world and has launched her own venture, Nirmata.ai. We'll have probably an opportunity to touch on that. Today, I want to focus on the fact that Switzerland and India, from what Tanvi tells me, are building a very exciting collaboration. And we know that we live in a world that is characterized by openness, and whoever doesn't understand that change will miss out. And India is very well recognized for the fact that they have launched this open architecture, UPI, and the Indian stack. They're exporting it to the region. And I guess now there's even more than that, and I want to talk about it and hear more, Tanvi, about that. So tell us about this exciting initiative that you are working on.
Thank you, Effie. There's going to be a lot of what has happened in this year. Before I get to Nirmata and what we're doing within Nirmata, I want to give an overall perspective of what has happened as the turning point, as the next level of Swiss-India relationships. Switzerland and India has always been very close together, whether it is the Bollywood in Switzerland or the Swiss watches in India. The cultural relationships between the two countries have always been extremely strong. But this year marked a very different relationship, which is terminating more commercially and more financially rather than just culturally. So the free trade agreement between Switzerland and India, not just Switzerland, but the EFTA countries, Switzerland, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, was signed in March of 2024, this year. And with this agreement, all these four countries would have an opportunity to have a tariff-free passage into India's developing economy, which constitutes of billions of individuals in the fastest growing middle class on the planet. So this means it gives us a free passage into precision manufacturing, into a lot of work we do around pharmaceuticals and medicines, watches per se, and also chocolates and milk products. Specifically for Switzerland and also similarly for the other countries. In return, India has requested the four countries to be able to get an investment into the country, because the other way around doesn't work. Switzerland is already a free economy and does not impose tariffs on imports. So as part of the trade agreement, which is pretty unique in the history of trade agreements, and people can both think positive and negative of what that could mean, $100 billion needs to be invested in 15 years, and also creating 1 million jobs. And obviously, this would not be possible for the government to do it by themselves with the size of governments we have, and that puts a lot of pressure on the financial sector in Switzerland to help achieve this $100 billion, which is also profitable for the country. So people like Effie and me and many of you listening in there from the traditional finance world are thinking about investments into the public sectors, investment into infrastructure, and the traditional forms of free trade agreement topics. But where it gets interesting is also the future of finance. And Switzerland is considered the hub of finance, especially for the private market, especially for the private banking area, and India, not so much. But India is known for its very open architecture, as you just mentioned, which is open source. And we don't know of any other government that has been so successful in the payments ecosystem. We have zero transaction fees as part of their open architecture, and it does not sit on top of the Visa and the MasterCard network. In multiple examples through times, we have discussed, is UPI and blockchain comparable in terms of the transaction fees and the payment and the peer-to-peer solutions that both can provide with a lot of ease and almost zero transaction cost.
Yeah,
so with the free trade agreement, we get a lot of opportunities to explore what we can do with Switzerland being a blockchain nation, with Switzerland being a private banking nation, and what India has to provide with its free open architecture.
It's extremely interesting, yeah, because you touched on the open architecture and the similarities that are not so much discussed between the blockchain world and UPI. And coincidentally, I'm publishing an article today looking at AI agents for cash management, both for retail users and for businesses. And one of the aspects, thinking through how this can look and who could build these AI agents, it's clear to me that there's a big advantage to where we have payment infrastructure that has an open architecture. It's much easier to integrate these AI agents. And the two places are UPI and blockchain technologies, right? So it's very interesting. And as you said, here in Switzerland, we are the nation, the blockchain nation, both because of cultural mindset, right? The democracy, the direct democracy, and therefore the governance principles of blockchain, but also the ecosystem that has grown here and is really a home to many innovations. So what does this mean, these investments that are scheduled or planned to come in? How do you see that affecting, impacting the FinTech? And when I say FinTech umbrella term, any innovation in financial services in India?
So the future of finance is how I try to bucket everything together, because FinTech has a connotation that kind of denominates a lot of the other areas that otherwise gets overlooked. So we can talk about how the investment. So one way of looking specifically to your previous question on the investments of the $100 billion that Switzerland has to make into India in exchange of the trade agreement is coming in through the outsourcing centers that companies like ABB, Nestle, Novartis, and others have already been doing and would continue to enhance more. The number two way would be China plus one. So a lot of manufacturing overall is getting more and more acceptable into India. A lot of the opportunities, specifically in precision manufacturing, a lot of blueprints that Switzerland is very good at providing to be constructed in volume out of India. So those are some of the bigger channels that the government officials have been focusing on, and bulk of the $100 billion would be dependent on that set of infrastructure related topics. But where the future of finance and FinTech related opportunities come along is the investments into the private sector, the investments into deep tech, the investments into the early stage, late stage companies pre-IPO. And in the last few months that I have been setting up Nirmata, what I've also realized that the Swiss deep tech, and we in Switzerland are known as the number one deep tech nation and number one innovative nation on the planet by WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. And I think for the 12th year in a row, this year again, Switzerland was voted number one. So in that context, it also gives a huge opportunity for these startups to grow and scale into India, because you get a huge set of talent pool out of India, cost arbitration for a startup, that is really important. And third of all, the IP protection as per the trade agreement, which means if a startup is scaling up in India, it could keep its IP into India without having the botheration, which usually never worked for China, right? That agreement between Switzerland and China for the IP related topic did not work. So in that context, that a lot of investments would be flowing in this direction. And the subset of it would be that investment into future of finance and FinTech related activities. The best way of explaining such a broad topic would be to use an example. So one of the companies we are investing into has built on top of UPI, the Unified Payment Interface, which is the India tech stack we have been discussing, and added the crypto angle to it. So it's UPCI, Unified Payment Crypto Interface. And we have tested its first pilot. It helps in reducing the transaction costs because it's built on top of UPI, not just within the fiat currency, but between the fiat and the cryptocurrencies, which has been a major challenge. So every time people are involving in using blockchain or any of the cryptocurrencies and then convert it into fiat, that results in a huge amount of money loss in the transaction fee. Or converting an Ethereum into a USDC or USDT, it causes a lot of the transaction money loss. So the UPCI is helping us solving that problem. And as we discussed before, people believed that outside of Asia, outside of Africa, where UPI is not implemented, it would not be transferable to the developed world. But we had its first pilot in Norway that have been extremely successful. So we are hoping that UPCI and the company we invested in, likewise, we'll continue to see a lot more of these companies coming in from India, built on top of the UPI tech stack, utilizing that open architecture, the open source platform, to build newer solutions for the developed world in Switzerland and for the rest of Europe.
Tanvi, is this UPCI another layer one blockchain?
No.
No, it's not.
It's just a patent that is built on top of UPI, which is an open source platform. And they have built in a payment solution. The company is called Paysio, and it can be developed on top of any layer one.
Very interesting. Okay. So a competitor maybe to Solana.
No, it can build on top of Solana. Solana wanted exclusivity, so they decided not to. But it can work on top of Sui, Algorand, or Ethereum, or any other layer one. I believe it does not mean to build up its own L1. It doesn't have to rely on one L1. It can operate on top of any L1.
Okay.
Just as infrastructure.
So really blockchain agnostic.
Exactly.
And since I know that you're deep into blockchain, both from your previous experience and currently, can you give us an overview of where India stands in terms of crypto, be it cryptocurrencies, be it stable coins, its CBDC, and so on?
That's a very good question, Efi. I would have a much better answer for it after my visit to Hyderabad this weekend, where we are deep diving across 250 Web3 companies across not just the payment and the financial aspects of blockchain, which is crypto, but also impact-oriented solutions that have been very impressed, have been developed very significantly into India. But besides that, I think the opportunities of what can happen into India, given they already have the UPI interface to develop on top of blockchain, is pretty immense. Or what I was also very impressed is how amazing the DigiBox solution is, which I understand is built up on top of a blockchain solution that helps you manage your identifications across driving license, across your travel passports, just on your phone. So people across India, educated, non-educated, semi-educated, have been carrying their IDs on the phone and not have to carry paper or anything physical to show to the authorities.
Is this something broader than Aadhaar?
Yeah, this is broader than Aadhaar. Aadhaar gives you identity, but on top of Aadhaar, if there is a driving license, if it's the paper of your cars that needs to be validated, if the police stops you for various reasons, usually what happens in our part of the world is we have to carry the papers out from our bunker and then show it to the respective individual that our papers are in order. We have the winter tires, we have a anti-pollution certificate. This does not happen here in India. So that solution is all on the phone. You don't need paperwork.
So UPI, I hope you agree if we say that UPI, yes, was born as a payment infrastructure. It is what we call a DPI, a digital public infrastructure, but it's born with the underlying mission to digitize public services. That is underpinning as a mission, which might not be the case in the case of Brazil and PIX. They didn't have that kind of mission. They were coming from a different sort of motive, if you want, or goal. Do you agree with that?
Exactly. And also, it kind of continues to keep adding more and more to it. I was just having a good chat with a friend yesterday over lunch, and I was talking to him about the use of blockchain for credential management, university degrees, and your study verification, your certifications to qualify you as an individual. And what he told me was pretty astonishing. Is like my grade 2 class daughter had been putting all of their credentials onto blockchain, and they needed the signature of their parents. So from the primary school level all the way to universities, the government is now providing a blockchain-based solution through which the credentials can be managed. So I think in that context, what we have been trying to do in our part of the world, in the developed economies, try to find a private solution to managing credentials and degrees. They have been able to implement it from a public utility perspective. And this is just the incremental application of UPI plus.
Very interesting. I think the tech stack in India is just a very unique example, not only because of its scale, but really this modularity and how we are seeing the impact on a nation that, as you said, is the #1 most populous nation right now, and with a lot of diversity in many aspects, and therefore it has to be admired, because it's one thing to implement solutions in a country like Switzerland, like Liechtenstein, or even, my home country, Greece. We're talking about less than 10 million people, which is really a very small population and very unified in many aspects.
Less than just Delhi, Efi.
Less than just Delhi. And I want to close, Tanvi, on a note with some thoughts about the end of this year, the beginning of next year, with all the changes that are going on, technological advancements, and the possibilities, but at the same time, a lot of tensions, geopolitical tensions that continue, and a lot of uncertainty and complexity. What are you excited mostly about, in brief, and what are you fearing, concerned more about?
I think more at a global level, I think that the uncertainties are over, per se, with Trump being elected as the president of Americas with absolute majority. I think that was surprising for me, not his election per se across the 3 houses. That gives him superpowers on major implementations he's been talking about. Besides all the other aspects, social, cultural, individual, personal, I do believe that that would mean a lot of clarity, positive or negative, for the blockchain universe, and henceforth for the finance universe. My understanding from an Indian perspective, and you had asked that question to me about stable coins and crypto and its state of affairs in this part of the world, had been waiting for regulations because they wanted to understand America's stance at it before making their own stance. So on the non-financial activities, I think they've made a lot of progress, as we talked about in India. But on the use of payments through blockchain and stable coins and cross-border payments and decentralized finance, all that sort of topics, and taxations and regulations, because it's not very clear legally on what does it mean if an individual, an Indian national resident in India, is holding cryptocurrencies. That has been the unclarity that had caused a lot of trouble to a lot of people, not knowing whether they're doing the right legal things or not, right? Which is quite open for us in terms of clarity in Switzerland and other developed parts of the world. So with that clarity coming into Americas seems very likely in 2025. I'm also hoping that by the summer or the autumn, we would see a lot of clarity into India as well. And then you can imagine how big a market would open up for cryptocurrencies, not just in retail, but also institutional. So I've been spending time with few individuals here where it seems that the interest from the institutions, from the high net worth individuals, from banks per se is pretty high in order to hold crypto in their treasuries, like it is in our part of the world. But without the clarity, they're being very cautious. So the moment that regulatory clarity comes in place, I would see for our industry in blockchain and henceforth for the future of finance, we would see the next couple of years exponentially growing and getting us the right answer, whether it is the right solution for the right problems in finance, or we have been just hallucinating and trying to solve a problem that does not exist.
And in that sense, Switzerland is very well positioned to share know-how in that area, whether it's accounting, whether it's any type of licensing around this new space and digital assets. But it will be interesting to see how India views and what type of regulation they come up, because obviously we have different types of views in terms of defining digital assets and treating them in the different regions. Okay, Tanvi, thank you
I
so
think
much.
one last thing on
Yeah.
that topic, you mentioned about how India would come along as part of the trade agreement. I'm now working personally on bringing in some of the blockchain education that Switzerland has pioneered also into the universities in India. So as soon as the regulations are clear, people would need an understanding of what is custody, how do you trade, what are the repercussions, what is security, what is wallets, which is an absolute alien language to people here, like it was for us in Switzerland 10 years back. So that is the grassroots foundational work. Switzerland is already starting to help India. And I can vouch for the work that is going on to bring in the blockchain education from our part of the world into India to make people being educated before they start, investing and understanding what it means for them and for their portfolios.
Yes, and also building, being able to build on top of what exists, because there's apps to be built on the infrastructure depending on the needs of each region and the problems that you're trying to solve. So there's a lot of potential in India, clearly, that is addressing and solving problems there. And I can imagine even for small businesses, given the other DPI that India has, right? What's it called? ONCD, right? For small businesses, I'm sure that there will be two applications on blockchain, either tokenizing private shares and verifications, contracts, all sorts of ideas that were impossible to digitize before, and now blockchain gives that opportunity if we can, as you said, educate and have the clarity to be able to get private money and entrepreneurs to scale these ventures.
Exactly. There's a lot that Switzerland and India can achieve together with blockchain as a common theme point.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tanvi. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Efi.